here now with Jennifer Kirk. You all know her from the Monday Club, big model railway fan person. I mean, enthusiast is what you would call yourself.
Yeah, all-round enthusiast, I guess. Which I blame my dad for that, because I was the middle of 3 girls, and he basically wanted an excuse to get his model railway out from the loft that he'd had as a child. So I was the one that took the bait, and it just became a thing that, you know, father and daughter did. And we used to go to preserved railways, we used to go to museums, and of course lots of model shops, and it was a great bonding thing with my father. And then I reached sort of teenage years, and I drifted off in other directions, like I think a lot of people do. I became heavily involved with music, with radio, and it wasn't until actually long after university when I came back to the hobby. And in the meantime, lots of things had changed. You know, I'd kind of been used to these second-hand Hornby 00 things from the 60s, and suddenly I can remember walking past a model shop, and I just did an about turn and went in. I thought, oh, I'll have a look at this, and it kind of rekindled an interest. And it was right at the point when all of these high detailed models were coming out of China for the first time, and there was this little voice in the back of my head that said, you know, you don't have to ask anybody's permission, you can just buy that, you know. You've got a job. And it's like, hey, yeah, I could. And that was how I got back into the hobby. Then I just made all of the same mistakes I think that everybody does when you haven't really done things like scenic work before, and you kind of muddle through, making lots and lots of mistakes, but learning from those mistakes.
Of course, I think that's part of the beauty of the actual hobby. There's so much involvement in the actual modelling, and like you say, it's such a learning curve just to get something right.
And of course back then, I mean, you're talking about the very early days of internet, so I don't remember there being places online particularly where you could go and meet people. If you weren't a member of a model club, it was, I just remember I had a subscription to Railway Modeller, and I found Railway Modeller at the time so boring, because they used to have articles and people go, yes, well, I'd ballasted in the tried and tested Pritchard-Smith method as outlined in the August 1965 edition. And all I could think was, I don't have that magazine. Tell me how you did it. Don't, you know, assume knowledge. And I actually ended up, I started reading Continental Modeller, and I found that to be a much better magazine, not because I was interested in overseas railways, but because it just seemed a much more of a show, not tell type magazine, and there was so much great stuff that people were modelling, US outline, European outline, and whereas Railway Modeller seemed to be still all about dyed sawdust and dyed lichen, Continental Modeller was embracing new products from these European manufacturers that I'd never heard of, like Noch and Preiser, and I just found that a much better place to learn from.
So when you first got back into it again then, what was your layout style, what was your era, and what did you start off with?
I can remember my first layout I tried to build, I kind of just did 1950s BR steam early diesel, because it kind of fitted in with what I'd been used to with the Hornby 00 stuff that my father and I had been using. And I very quickly realised that actually I liked lots of other things as well, and in particular BR Rail Blue. I found amazing. I can remember going into a shop in Morecambe, and I was there because I wanted to buy a BR Black 04 shunter, and they had one of the brand new at the time Bachmann Class 08 shunters in Rail Blue, and I'm like, actually I really like that. and I made myself buy the BR Black 04, and then after I thought, why am I buying something that I like less than what I was looking at? Why am I stopping myself from buying what I want? And from then on, it was a case of, you know what, I'll just buy what I like. I had a good job. I was working at the BBC, and money wasn't a massive issue at the time, and the prices were incredibly cheap. So I was just buying huge amounts of stuff across many different eras, and there was no real structure to what I was doing. And actually, I didn't mind that at the time. I quite liked that.
Yeah. There's quite, to be fair, I mean, you do get people that are dead strict on what they want to model. But I think the beauty of the actual hobby is the fact that you can just do anything.
Yeah.
You can just mix and match because it's your model, it's your thing.
Absolutely. And there are people out there who like everything to be absolutely perfect to a specific era and a specific geographical location. But actually, a hobby's meant to be fun. And if you're doing something that's kind of squeezing some of the fun out, then actually you're doing the hobby wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm all for just buying whatever you want, whatever era you want, mix and match stuff, have a pre-grouping Robinson 8K pulling MEA box wagons in mainline blue. It doesn't matter as long as you're enjoying yourself.
Exactly. Weir Yard. How long would you say the construction of Weir Yard took?
The bulk of it was done in about a year. And that included converting the room it was in. Yeah. It was just you went up there and you could actually see out through the gaps in the slates. So it was all lined out, and then electric was put up there, lighting, an internet connection, and that I just kept building. And I think I'm always driven by an inner impatience.
To get things done.
To get things done.
I want it done yesterday, not today.
Yeah, and it's like I just need to get it done. I need to get it done. I don't like things that are unfinished. Yeah. But then the problem with that is that you reach a point where my enjoyment is from the building of models, not really the running of them. So once I reached a point where the layout was fairly finished, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? And actually I found it wasn't too bad because I keep changing things on Weir Yard. The track largely stays the same, but as I learn more about new techniques and new products from new manufacturers, I found myself redoing sections of the scenery, and I quite enjoy doing that. And I think that's one of the great things about building a model. It's never truly finished if you don't want it to be. And it's just really quite nice to take a little area and improve it. So Weir Yard's been there for, I think, 5 years, something like that. But it was what would look largely complete in the first year, but the scenery has moved on a lot since then.
Right. But actually brings me on to the next question, which was, is there going to be an expansion to Weir Yard? Is it possible? Or?
It's not really possible. No. The room's too constrained because it's up in the slant of the roof, and it slants in 3 different directions. So there's no possibility of having another level above it. And there's already a level below it. That's the fiddle yard.
Right.
It's the bit that people don't see.
Yeah.
But that's where all of my coaching stock sits.
Yeah.
And it's probably about 2/3 of the entire area of Weir Yard is underneath it, just as fans and sidings.
Yeah, when you're on camera all the time, obviously you're just seeing the above section, the actual area.
Yeah.
So far, so yeah.
I think I counted there's about 300 coaches in the fiddle yard. Mostly things like Bachmann Mark 1s or Hornby Gresley coaches. For some reason I have got so many of those, but they just all tend to get put down there, and I'm not really the kind of person who can sit and play with trains for a long period of time, so I have to force myself to change what's on the tracks, otherwise it would be the same trains rumbling round.
Keep that interesting.
And for me it's very much about the building. I love building stuff. Running trains, not my thing. People say, oh, do you use wear yard to shunt? And it's like, well, it's built to be able to, but I have never had any kind of enjoyment from doing that. I think I did it once to prove it was possible, and then I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't enjoy that. So whilst every single track is wired up, every single point is wired up, most of wear yard never really gets used, other than lots of wagons sat on the tracks. I mean, the turntable works. It's fully electrically functional.
So you could use it if
you
wanted
could
to,
shunt locomotives in and out that TMD, but I never do, because it's just, it'd be like listening to paint dry for me. I loved building it, but it sits there and looks pretty.
Yeah. Talking of building, we're actually sat in the garden at the moment with your new project,
the Garden Railway Mark.
Is it G gauge, O gauge?
O gauge.
O gauge.
And this is actually Mark III, so there's been 2 previous garden railways here. The first one was an extension of the layout I had in my shed, which was Trinity Road, and that was in 00. It was raised up above the ground on brick piers, and that lasted a few years. There's loads of video footage. We filmed so much out here, especially in summer. It was great, but the woodwork just rotted. And I'd already decided that once the ground, which was all built up anyway, settled, and I kind of got a feel for what I wanted to do, I always wanted to do a proper ground level O gauge layout in the garden. And once Trinity Road got dismantled and I had wear yard in the loft, there was no need for running 00 in the garden, and I built a figure of 8 track, and it was just an absolute disaster. Because I forgot the cardinal rule that trains do not like gradients.
No.
And it's like, what am I doing here? I've got a figure of 8, it's constantly going up or down. The track was twisting this way and that, nothing was level. I think I ran a train around it once to prove you could. And then it just got buried under leaf mulch. And when I redeveloped for this, I thought, I'm going to learn from those mistakes, and I'm going to actually do it properly. So as you can see, it's a very substantial construction.
It is.
And I've gone out of my way to make sure that stuff is vaguely level.
And I presume when it's finished, this is just going to be like an oval.
Yeah. I mean, there will be a couple of sidings off it, mostly for scenic purposes. But it's purely to have trains trundling around in the garden. And that's the way I like it. On a day like today, have a gin and tonic, sit down and just watch a train trundle through a landscape. And there's something really great about a garden railway.
It is,
because you're using nature as your scenery. So I've got a lot of like alpine evergreens and stuff, and there's a rockery that's all built in around it. And I think it's going to look quite good.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you're saying, that using nature, I mean, I think it enhances that realism. Obviously, with the modelling, you can get as close as possible to make it look real, but bringing it outside, it definitely...
there's something really nice about it, and actually building it, it's a very different technique. So, lots of things like bricklaying, real bricklaying to make the track bed underneath, and you're kind of sculpting cement and trying different materials that you just never use on an indoor layout. So the track is it is actually held fast in a kind of a concrete mix to make the ballast, and it does look quite garish at the moment because it's newly laid, but it will weather down and it'll go a kind of probably a greenish colour, a dark green brown with verdigris, and it'll actually look really, really good. And there's techniques you can use using things like live yogurt. You get a big tub of cheap live yogurt, and you literally just smear it onto everything, and moss and lichen just suddenly turn up out of nowhere, apparently.
No, that's actually a good tip, that.
Somebody gave me the tip. I don't know if it works, but that is what I'm going to try here. So where it's all brash, that is to be covered with stuff.
So presumably with the bridges, this is going to be a river.
Well,
Oh,
I not really thought that. I just
not
wanted
really.
bridges.
Just wanted bridges.
And there's,
Yeah.
I
mean, you've got to have bridges to be fair.
yeah, bridges are amazing as a scenic device on any layout. But actually, they just save me a lot of bricks at the front more than anything. And I just like bricks. It was a good excuse to put them in. And but underneath, this is actually the concrete base that it's going over is the Mark II garden railway base. I never took it up. I just built on top of it.
Going back to when you were saying about where you had and you just wanted things done.
Yeah.
The time scale on this one. I mean, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about getting rid of the trees. Do you have to do that before you finish it, or?
Well, at the moment it's like a horseshoe shape, so I've got 3/4 of what will become an oval. But there's a conifer tree which came with the house. We've been here 12 years, something like that, and it was a mature tree when we moved in, and it's got even more mature since then. And the problem is that it slowly pushes things out. And the Mark II garden railway ended up with gaps, like 2 or 3 inch wide, where it literally snapped the concrete base and moved it and the track apart. So you just end up with a big gap. So it's got to go, and it rains down these sort of brown dead needles on everything.
Yes, I can imagine they're a bit of a nightmare to tidy up.
Yeah, and also they smother everything else. And we've got fruit trees here as well that we have planted. And I'd rather have the fruit trees. They seem a nice productive feature of the garden than a conifer that just kind of nukes into a wasteland everything that's under it.
When it, one of the questions that I was thinking about is, do you prefer steam or diesel? What's your favourite?
I like both.
You like both?
No real preference. I mean, my favourite locomotives are small shunting diesel locomotives. There's something I like quirky about them, but not necessarily to the detriment of steam locomotives. I like things like Lancashire and Yorkshire pugs, so much so I've tracked down and got one of every single example that has ever been released of that model, going back to the 1980s. And you know, I love everything. If you saw my collection, it'd be like, oh yeah, I see now. You just like collecting one of everything. And you know, and some things like A4s, one of every single A4 is what I'm attempting to do.
So collection-wise, will it ever stop?
Oh,
Or is that what gives you your interest still? Because obviously you're saying that you slowed down on the construction of where you had, which is one of your favourite things to do, and then obviously you don't like playing with trains as such. So collecting trains just keeps you
It's
interested,
slowed down a lot. I must admit, I buy a lot less than I used to, and I think in part it's because when you reach a point where you've got nearly 400 locomotives, it's a lot easier to be a little bit more disciplined. And I kind of made it my mission to get one of every type of locomotive that's been released ready to run, and once I have one of each type, I'm done then with that type of locomotive, unless there's a few exceptions where I think, actually I really like this type of locomotive, I'm going to try and collect them all. So things like the Lancashire and Yorkshire pugs, Class 07 diesel shunters, getting all the ones in BR blue with the tops numbers on, and Class 25s as well in rail blue. I just sort of went a bit mad. But once you reach a point where you've got them all, you can be a lot more disciplined. I hardly buy any rolling stock anymore. I mean, you can imagine
I suppose, if you've got the
300 coaches, you don't really need any more Mark 1s. Because I set out, in the early days, I'd set out to have what I called my green train, which would be the southern region green ones. I got the blood and custard rake, I've got an intercity rake, I've got a regional railways rake. Once you've got all these, you're like, actually, I don't need any more. And I think one day I was sat there and I was counting up how many of the blue-grey ones I had, and it was about 22. I'm thinking you can't use 22 in one day, it's just too much. So when new stuff comes out, there has to be something very special about it. for me to buy new rolling stock.
Right. What about liveries? Do you have a favourite livery?
I do like a lot of the pre-grouping liveries, and from the pre-grouping liveries, I think South Eastern and Chatham Railway, London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, and Great Central Railway are probably my 3 top picks.
Yeah.
There's just, I couldn't tell you what it is about them, but I really do like them. But then conversely, I do also have a thing for blue steam locomotives. So I guess if manufacturers made more available in Caledonian Railway blue, my preferences might shift.
I do actually like the blue steam myself. I'm waiting to see the Sir Nigel Gresley. It's just down south all the time at the moment, but yeah, I do have knowledge that it is actually going to come up north in September. So I can't wait to see that one because it looks really good in the blue.
It does, yeah. The BR Experimental Blue is a very eye-catching colour, and you can kind of understand why British Rail then, when they went for the corporate livery, went for the blue, because it did look good on the steam locomotives before they decided to stick with green. Although I really like the experimental purple, but I think only about I think it's only something like six or seven locomotives ever actually got that livery, but it does look really nice.
Is that the same purple? I was in Nuffy's model shop yesterday, and he was saying that he liked the purple Deltic.
No, oh, that's the Porterbrook leasing livery.
One, yeah.
No, the experimental purple it's more like it's a very bluey purple. So it's imagine express blue, but with a slight purpley tinge. Probably more akin to what Great Eastern Railway livery might have been. But it's really hard to find models in that. The only one I've actually got is Walter K. Wigham, which is one of the A4s, and Hornby did a model a few years back, and I believe they've previously done as a special for, I think it was Beatties, it shows how far back it was, and I think that was Woodcock. Again, another A4. I think there was 4 A4s got it, and I think a King got it as well, and possibly a Merchant Navy.
Yeah. So going forward, what plans have you got for the future for the model railways or the YouTube channel and
Well, in terms of building, I think obviously on the cards at the moment is finishing off the Garden Railway. I've really been enjoying the build, and I feel like I've got it right this time. It's a Garden Railway that's still going to be here in 20, 30, 40 years time, still being used, and that's kind of what I wanted. The previous 2 examples of Garden Rails were always slightly disappointing. Well, the last one very disappointing because it never really was usable. So I'm hoping with this, it's going to be something that I can enjoy year after year.
Yeah. Right, well, that's been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely welcome.
It's been lovely to see you, and yeah.
Well, look, it's been absolutely great, and thank you for coming. And sometimes it's nice to be interviewed rather than to interview other people. It's quite interesting because Montana never really gave interviews. If you interviewed somebody from Hornby, Simon Kohler was always the guy.
Yeah.
And I bumped into Montana actually at Making Tracks 3, and I said to her, oh, could I get like a 5-minute interview, knowing full well that she's like weeks away from leaving Hornby, and she's like, yeah, that's fine. And I've not found another interview that somebody's done with her other than an interview done by Hornby for their own YouTube channel.
She's very well known, but you don't actually see her, do you?
Yeah, I think for a long time it was always Simon handled that kind of thing, and if you asked for an interview, it was you always got Simon. But I thought it was very important to get Montana's perspective, because there aren't that many women in railway modelling. And she's actually, I guess, the most famous because she's there in a very prominent position in one of the big manufacturers. So I wanted to get on record an interview with her, and I'm glad that I did, because
Yeah,
I'm guessing
good.
once she moves on to a new job, which isn't in the model rail industry, I don't know whether we'll see so much of her.
Yeah, it's a shame really, but like you say, there's not many people. I mean, there's not many females in rail itself.
It's getting there.
It is getting there, but yeah.
I mean, that was one of the things that when I just went, you know what, I can't be bothered keeping quiet that I like model trains. I found actually quite a few of my friends went, actually I like them as well.
Yeah.
So I think there's a quite a large contingent of women who, I guess it's more acceptable to say you like it. In the same way, there must be men who like sewing, but they tend not to talk about
exactly,
it.
Yeah, well, why not? Yeah.
So things are changing.
Yeah.
We're dragging gender stereotypes kicking and screaming under the wheels of our train.
I mean, I have noticed actually a lot of your subscribers are female, which is good.
Yeah.
And of all ages as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of male subscribers as well. But yeah, I think it's important to show people that it's acceptable, it's all right. Because railway modelling is it's such a broad church of life skills, and that's what I always say to people is that it's not just this hobby where you play with toy trains. You learn things like woodwork, you learn about electrics, how to wire things up, you learn about planning skills, you learn a lot of creative skills, improvisational skills, and it builds a lot of confidence as well. And I think these are all very good transferable skills. So if anybody ever poo-poos your hobby and goes, oh, that's a silly hobby, you can tell them, well, look at all these life skills which I've picked up and I've learned. And you have to hire somebody in at great expense to wire a plug. I know how to do it because I learned.
And it is as well, and one of the places that you can learn is a club. And it's a wealth of knowledge there. You can walk into any model railway club, or most, and they will share their knowledge with you.
Yeah, and sometimes as well, if you've not got a huge budget to be able to spend, it's a great way of being able to do things, to be a part of making a big layout without having to spend a lot of money in the process. And it gives you access to doing things that you might not be able to do at home as well. Which I think it's a great thing.
It is, yeah, and brings people together as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries. Anyway, great to talk to you.
It's really good to talk to you too. Thank you.
Take care. See you all later.